Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and the moment you saw Dragon Breath was added to Tyranitar's moveset at the start of the season, you had to know this video was coming. In today's video, I'm putting Dragon Breath on my perfect IV Shadow Tyranitar and taking it for a spin in the Open Master League. Dragon Breath is Tyranitar's first energy-focused fast move, allowing it to spam out charge attacks faster than it ever has before. The team that I'm running features Reshiram on the lead, with Lunala and Tyranitar on the back, so it's ABA weak to ground, but outside of that, it seems pretty balanced. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And in game number 1, we're off to an amazing start, leading Reshiram into Metagross. Opponent is going to save switch into Kyurem White, and I will respond with Tyranitar. I chose to run Fire Blast on Tyranitar just in case I see a Zacian, because Fire Blasting a Zacian and picking up the one-hit KO would be very funny. I shield a potential Ice Burn, but my opponent does not go for it. Instead, they end up firing off the Fusion Flare. Brutal Swing will set up a farm down. My opponent makes a last-second charge attack, but this is only a resisted Fusion Flare, and Tyranitar exits with quite a lot of energy. In comes the Metagross. I farm up just shy of the Fire Blast, but I feel that it's too risky. If my opponent shields, losing that much energy could potentially get my opponent back in the game. But they end up shielding a Brutal Swing, and now look at the speed on Tyranitar. Brutal Swing after Brutal Swing after Brutal Swing. This poor Metagross in absolute shambles. They lose a bunch of HP, they lose both their shields, they finally get the farm down, but Reshiram still has a shield to protect itself against the potential Earthquake. They bait with the Meteor Mash, they're farming up. In the back is Lugia, and this game will be a win. In comes Lunala, and Lunala will be able to close out this game. My opponent was running a team that was triple weak to Tyranitar, and unfortunately they paid the price, because Tyranitar put in monster work against this team. Lugia fires off the Aeroblast, but Lunala does not care. Lunala gets the full farm down, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. Picking up a very bad lead in the next match, Reshiram into Palkia. Normally, Reshiram into Palkia isn't bad, but unfortunately, I have a bad defense stat on my Reshiram, meaning I take 1 extra damage per Dragon Breath and get crushed in this matchup. I do get an Aqua Tail catch onto Lunala, and my opponent sends in their own Reshi. They CMP tie here. If it's Fusion Flare, I can't hang on, but double super effective Crunch will take the knockout. And that means I basically got no damage on this Reshiram, which is quite unfortunate. I'm going to bring in my own Reshiram. Unfortunately, I do end up lagging a bit there, and I will fire off this Stone Edge, hoping to just take the knockout. Stone Edge is going to be shielded. My opponent, unfortunately, they are committing resources to this Reshiram, and I think this is going to be a tricky game. In comes Tyranitar, needing to 1v3. In the back is Zamazenta, and it's time. Tyranitar farming up to the Fire Blast, but Fire Blast is just too expensive of a move. I can't even get to the Fire Blast with an energy head start before they're able to make their Behemoth Bash. And now that I have only 1 shield left, unfortunately, I cannot win. I farmed up to 100 energy and through the Fire Blast, but now Palkia is just always going to get to 2 Aqua Tails before I'm able to get to my double Brutal Swing. So there's just no path forward in this game, unfortunately. I will farm up, my opponent switches into Reshiram, and Reshiram would actually make a charge attack before I can farm down as well. Unfortunately, I just don't think this game was really winnable for me. If I had a Reshiram that wasn't getting break pointed by Palkia, maybe I could have stayed in, played out that matchup, and it could have gone differently, but unfortunately, I do not, and I ended up taking the loss. Great lead in the next match, Reshiram into Metagross. Opponent save switches into a shiny Yveltal, and I'm really hoping to try and get an Oblivion Wing catch onto Tyranitar. I bait the Fusion Flare, get the shield, try for the catch onto Tyranitar, but I am unsuccessful. This means that I'm now in danger of getting Focus Blasted. Focus Blast is double super effective, so I'm forced to put up the shield. Now, I do not have Stone Edge, but my opponent does not know that, so I'm going to farm up a ton of energy and go for the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is going to be shielded. I go for Brutal Swing number 2, but I know that this is just simply not going to do enough damage. Brutal Swing lands, Yveltal barely able to hang on and make it to a second Focus Blast. This means that my Tyranitar is forced to double shield, but I exit with a ton of energy. My opponent can't bring back in the Metagross. Metagross is going to get crushed by Brutal Swings. They're forced to send in their final Pokemon, which is Palkia. And Palkia really not going to appreciate what Tyranitar has in store for it. Tyranitar has the back-to-back Brutal Swings locked and loaded. This is going to be getting Palkia deep into the red HP. Palkia undertaps the Aqua Tail, but the damage has been done. I'm going to immediately queue up a switch into the Reshiram because I need to ensure that I can outpace the Metagross and make it to the Fusion Flare. Once the Fusion Flare lands, the game is over because the Metagross is just simply too low. Metagross will finally be able to knock out Reshiram, but the damage has been done. Tyranitar basically put the team on his back. Tyranitar was pretty useless in the previous game, but in this game, definitely the MVP, and we're able to take the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Reshiram into Ho-Oh, an incredibly good lead for Reshiram. My opponent safe switches into Dialga, and I'm more than happy just to stay in here and play this out. If my opponent wants to win the zeros, they have to go for the Roar of Time, meaning they lose a lot of energy, and then I can get a sick farm down with one of my back Pokemon. Reshiram, gonna be no shielding, Roar of Time would be very okay, but they end up going for an Iron Head, and that actually allows me to make it to a second Fusion Flare. Now I get switch advantage or shield advantage. My opponent puts up the shield, in comes Lunala looking for a full farm down, but my opponent will make the last second Roar of Time. I put up the shield on Lunala, opponent is going to be pivoting out and sending in Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh will take quite a lot of damage from Shadow Ball neutrally. Shadow Ball into the Ho-Oh does get shielded, and I'm actually able to make Shadow Ball number 2 before they're able to potentially apply a debuff with Sacred Fire. Shadow Ball lands, getting my opponent very low, and you know what? I'm just going to save my shield for Tyranitar. Sacred Fire does not take the knockout. In comes Tyranitar, and Tyranitar is looking to sweep. Tyranitar gonna fire off this Brutal Swing, not gonna let the Ho-Oh make it to a Sacred Fire. In the back is Xerneas, not the Zacian I was hoping to see, but I can still go for a Fire Blast. Fire Blast will hit for big neutral damage, but the worrisome thing is I don't think it's going to one-shot. Xerneas is now at the back-to-back close combats, and I have to call, do they throw back-to-back? I say yes. I go for Lunala, but I don't get the catch, and now I'm in trouble. In comes Reshiram. They get a little bit of Dragon Breath damage with Dialga. Reshiram does not get the Fusion Flare, and despite a really promising start to the game, unfortunately, we end up taking the loss. Maybe if I had Stone Edge, which is a lot cheaper, I could have got the 2 charge attacks there and had a better chance, but unfortunately, Fire Blast, once again, not quite what I'm looking for. We get a pretty decent lead in the next match, leading Reshiram into Kyurem White. My opponent makes a nice catch, catching my Fusion Flare bait onto their Shadow Tyranitar. I'm going to farm up here and give them a taste of their own medicine, as now I'm going to catch their Brutal Swing onto my own Tyranitar. The Tyranitar mirror match is a bit weird for me because I don't have Stone Edge. So, I'm able to get some okay damage with Dragon Breath, but Brutal Swing is not going to do much. Brutal Swing is going to land, my opponent is able to hang on, and they CMP tie here as they fire off their own Brutal Swing. They're going to pivot, in comes Zacian, switch timer not up, so I throw this Brutal Swing not for the damage, but purely just to burn my switch clock. Brutal Swing, not going to do a whole lot, but Reshiram, this damage is definitely going to add up. Reshiram firing off the Fusion Flare is going to be shielded. I'm going to try and get to another Fusion Flare, but my opponent's counts are precise, and they will CMP time me here. That's going to be the close combat. That will take the knockout, and in comes Lunala. Lunala's getting some very valuable damage, as my opponent will fire off the Behemoth Blade, and then look to pivot back into Kyurem White. This game is going to come down to a bait call. If my opponent successfully baits with Fusion Flare, then they're going to outpace. So, it all comes down to this. I think about it, I shield at the last second, and I shield correctly as it's the Ice Burn. My opponent can now make a Fusion Flare, but they're going to fall short of the Ice Burn. Fusion Flare will miss the knockout, and that allows me to overfarm slightly before knocking them out with a Shadow Ball. The game will come down to a catch from my opponent. Can they catch the Shadow Ball onto Tyranitar? In comes Zacian farming up. There's the catch attempt onto Tyranitar. I snipe them down with mine. They get the Metal Claw head start, but they're still 1 away. We get the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball KOs Zacian as my opponent concedes the match. We see a very bad lead in the next match, leading Reshiram into Tyranitar. An opposing Tyranitar is not really something that I thought of when building this team, but I'm actually pretty weak to it. I'm going to respect the Stone Edge just to get Brutal Swing baited, and man, this is going to be a very tough game to win. I fire off the Fusion Flare bait, Tyranitar is going to put up the shield, and I'm just going to go for the Fusion Flare. I know Fusion Flare will not knock out, but I just need chip damage onto this Tyranitar. The fact that it's the non-Shadow Tyranitar as well gives them extra survivability in this matchup, and Stone Edge KOs Reshi. I'm going to bring in my Tyranitar looking for a farm down, and unfortunately I can't get the farm down before my opponent is able to make the Stone Edge. Stone Edge lands, getting me very, very low. I exit with a ton of energy, but unfortunately, this is going to be a very tricky game because I'm very low. In comes Reshiram, and oh my goodness, this is where I really wish I had Stone Edge. Brutal Swing is going to be shielded. If I had the Stone Edge, I could basically just take a knockout here, but unfortunately I don't have it. Brutal Swing lands, in comes Lunala, and man, after this game, I'm definitely going to be TMing Stone Edge. I have to respect the potential crunch, they do go for it, and in the back is a shiny Ho-Oh. Man, if I had Stone Edge, I just win the game on the spot because I could have KO'd the Reshiram and still had a shield for Lunala. Whereas unfortunately, Lunala is now shieldless, I'm going to get smacked by a Sacred Fire, and I'm in a lot of trouble. My only potential win con would be basically a perfect undercharge of a Shadow Ball into a Dragon Breath farm down where I can make a Brutal Swing. I undercharge, I get farm on Tyranitar, we make the Brutal Swing. It all comes down to this. Can Brutal Swing KO here? Can we win anyway? No, we cannot. Reshiram hangs on, and unfortunately, we lose that game. We move to the next match, now with Stone Edge on our Tyranitar, and pick up a bad lead Reshiram into Palkia. Again, my Reshiram's defense stat betraying me in this matchup as I'm taking more Dragon Breath damage than a Hundo Reshiram would. I'm able to catch the Aqua Tail bait, and my opponent sends out Zacian. Considering I have a Tyranitar in the back, this is an incredibly good bait out for me. I could potentially double shield the Lunala and never take a Behemoth Blade in this matchup, but this team is pretty soft to Palkia energy, so I think just playing the zeros and saving shields is probably going to be the best course of action. Now, I can bring in the Reshiram, I'll fire off the Fusion Flare before they're able to make the close combat, and get Zacian off the field. Since my opponent baited when I got the catch, they still do have a decent amount of Palkia energy. I'm going to be firing off the Fusion Flare because they have to respect the crunch. It's the exact same energy. They will put up the shield. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm getting farmed down, so I send in Tyranitar. I'm hoping to Dragon Breath down before they reach the back-to-back Aqua Tails, but unfortunately, they are able to get there. They survive on 1 HP. I have to hope it's something like a Lunala in the back, and it is Lunala, and this game is over, as Tyranitar in the zeros can always land a Brutal Swing and farm down. So, we're good here. We get the farm down. No, they get damage registration error. They make a Moonblast they're never supposed to make. The Moonblast KOs. And now it all comes down to this. Do I survive a Dragon Breath? Yes, I do. And thankfully, we win the game that we were supposed to win. A familiar lead in the next match, Reshiram into Ho-Oh. My opponent safe switches into Zacian, and so far they have zero answer to Reshiram. Reshiram's going to be unleashing Fusion Flare, devastating damage onto the Zacian. I farm up, switch into Lunala, tell me I caught the close combat. We did. Triple resisted close combat catch, Shadow Claw down, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to the next match, leading Reshiram into Lunala. I'm going to fire off the Fusion Flare here right away, bluffing that I have Crunch, but my opponent does not fall for it. They're not going to put up the shield. I'm more than happy just to let this go because I know I do survive the Shadow Ball. My opponent does actually go for the Moonblast and now brings in Zekrom. Zekrom will be answered with Tyranitar. They fire off the Fusion Bolt, and here I believe I made a misplay. I don't have to shield Fusion Bolt as Tyranitar, so I very easily could have just let that go and then return fire with the Brutal Swing. That's my unfamiliarity with playing Tyranitar, and unfortunately, again, it's another 1 HP survive. They're able to hang on. This one was not damage registration error, it was just a clean survive. And they send in Reshiram as their final Pokemon. This is going to be a tough game to win, but I don't think it's unwinnable. I'm going to pivot back into my own Reshiram, fire off the Fusion Flare, the threat of a Crunch, this time able to get a shield from my opponent. If they have Crunch, I've lost this game, but if they don't have Crunch, I actually think that I can win. So I'm going to be no shield in the first. If it's Crunch, the game is over. My opponent doesn't have Crunch. They have Fusion Flare, and this game is still winnable. My opponent should look to switch in Lunala. I have to bank the back-to-back moves and then snipe them with Tyranitar. I bank them back-to-back, but they live on 1 HP for a second time. If I got that simultaneous knockout, could have taken the win with the back-to-back Shadow Balls, but unfortunately, we lose that game. We've got mirror leads in the final match, Reshiram versus Reshiram. A lot of opponents run Crunch, so I'm just going to be full sending the Stone Edge. Stone Edge takes the surprise KO, and they lose a massive amount of energy on their Reshiram. But the happiness is short-lived as in comes Zygarde. Zygarde walls off all this Reshiram energy, so I decided to make a bit of a weird play. I'm going to fully sacrifice my Lunala to the Zygarde energy in exchange for banking double Fusion Flares. I'm counting on the fact that even though my Reshiram energy is useless against the Zygarde, the Reshiram energy could potentially help me sweep against whatever they have in the back. I wait down the timer, send in Tyranitar, and Tyranitar is going to look to farm up. I have to respect the potential Earthquake. It would do almost all my HP, and they go for a Crunch bait. That is a devastating bait, and now I'm going to farm back up to the back-to-back Brutal Swings. Brutal Swing is going to connect, getting them low. I can't quite get the farm down, so I will fire off the last-second Brutal Swing. They're going to lose a lot of energy if they let this go, which they do, but that's not what I was hoping to see in the back. It is Zacian. Unfortunately, my Tyranitar cannot do much in this endgame, but the double fusion flares that I banked from earlier suddenly look very, very threatening. I'm going to get to land a fusion flare onto my opponent, but the one worry is, can I make a brutal swing on Tyranitar? Because fusion flare does not one-shot. My opponent's going to exit up a ton of energy. They're 2 off the back-to-back close combats. In comes Tyranitar, and with the Dragon Breath pacing, we outpace by a singular turn. Brutal swing KOs the Zacian, and that's a good game. And now some final thoughts on Tyranitar and its place in the Master League meta. I do think that Tyranitar is pretty firmly in the category of an anti-meta Pokemon. I think there are quite a few teams that can be very, very weak to Tyranitar. A lot of very popular Lunala teams don't really have a good check to Tyranitar, and that can make Tyranitar very, very strong in some games. However, the unfortunate thing about Tyranitar is Tyranitar in other games can be a really big liability. It doesn't really have the consistency of something like a Lunala or a Reshiram, where game in, game out, they are just very consistent across the board. Tyranitar is a little bit more feast or famine. Definitely more of a hit or miss style Pokemon, where in some games, like against the Metagross, it felt like a million brutal swings just took over a game, and my opponent really struggled to get it off the field. And there's other games where it tried to sweep, and unfortunately, it just felt like more of a liability. So I think Tyranitar is definitely meaningfully improved in the Master League. It's now a very playable Mon, but it's definitely in more of anti-meta status because it has a little bit of the 3-move syndrome. I think potentially it getting a coverage move in the future that is cheaper than Fire Blast could be really nice. An ability to hit back against steel types that isn't 80 energy, I think would be a really big plus for Tyranitar. Because unfortunately, Fire Blast, outside of the surprise factor, if you ever have a Fire Blast shielded in a game, that game is probably just going to be lost because you've lost so much energy. Even though you have this incredible energy generation on Tyranitar, losing 80 energy is really difficult to come back from. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. Thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.